welcome again. We are on round 2 of BREC Conversations, and I have the fabulous and delightful Nathan Gardiner with me today. Now, initially we were talking about how we introduce our fantastic guests, but I'd actually rather hear about you from you. Tell us about your background. For those who don't know you, tell us about what you do, where you've come from, all the nitty-gritty stuff.
Sure, Sam. I'm what they call a regional artist, and I suppose that just means I'm an artist that happens to live in a regional area. So I'm from Capel. It's really nice. There are a lot of artists that live in Capel, likewise that live in Bunbury. We have beautiful light here. Yeah. All the painters and stuff that I talk to say that's what attracts them, is those couple of hours of golden light that Bunbury gets every afternoon, which is really good for unplaying air painting. But anyway, as far as visual arts, I work more as an installation artist. Mm-hmm. Of course, you and I are familiar with each other because I work at BREC and I'm the Young Voices facilitator there. And you also know me because of my coffee addiction at Mojo. So,
yes. You know, fond friends.
Yes. So that's a little bit about me. I've been fortunate in that I've been able to travel. So I came from a rural area and got like a totally decent grounding in the arts. Where you come from, I don't think always matters. Yeah. But to be able to extend what you do, I've been fortunate. I've been able to travel to Britain, to Asia, to America. And I've been able to do that under a creative banner.
Yeah, because you've worked in a variety of fields really as well. It's not been necessarily pigeonholed into one area, because you've had a background in fashion as well. And
telling us at school we would be the generation that would not have one woe-to-go job like our parents had done, that you could spend 40 years in an occupation. So they said, get used to chopping and changing. And I certainly have, but there has been that continuity of creative endeavour. Yeah. So when I first left school, I graduated the grammar school in '94, and I got on a plane and went to Britain on the Australia-Britain gap. They were the gap, Australia-Britain Society gap year is what I took. And you just vaguely nominated what area that you wanted to work in, and there was nothing really offering any creative areas to work in, so I chose to work in what they were calling social care, and that took me to, I wound up in an outdoor activities adventure centre for people with profound and multiple disabilities.
Wow.
So you lived there and worked there 7 days a week, and you know, even in that I found a creative outlet, because I got there and people will just pick creative people, and they said, we're going to get you to revamp the art room and run all the nighttime sessions, because our residents would come, they'd do activities during the day, and then they'd have evening activities, everything from like hydrotherapy to, well, art therapy, which what I started doing, branching into music therapy, because at the time alternative therapies were really big in Britain. And so, you know, that took me straight out of high school into my first job, which thankfully led into other jobs. I worked in a private residential home. I was a classroom assistant for people, again, with disabilities. And then everything changed one day when a friend took me to Birmingham to the Clothes Show, which was a show that I'd watched on Channel 4 fairly religiously. It was on right before Jean-Paul Gaultier's Eurotrash, which was a great show. And I went to the clothes show in Birmingham. I was 19 at the time, Australian in a foreign country, maybe standing out a little bit, and that's where I got approached to do some runway modelling, which took me out of the West Country in Britain and landed me in London for about 3 months.
Wow, big change.
That was a huge change, but also an introduction to the fashion and modelling industry. So After a while though, you run out of visa. I'd been in Britain a lot longer than the initial 7 months that I had meant to be there, and I'd had a great time and learnt lots of new skills. And you know, I worked in a factory for a while. I worked in a cosmetic pencil factory.
Oh wow.
But what was interesting, we made you know, Bobby Brown and Max Factor and Revlon, and I should have packed my suitcases when I came home. But at the time, I had no idea. So I came back to Australia.
Yeah. So that probably gave you a bit of a standing background in developing and finding out where you wanted to go. Because I think a lot of people after they leave high school, if you're not one of those kids that wakes up one day and says, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a vet, I'm going to be XYZ. I think when you go searching for something like that, and you go traveling and you find and see such a big wide world out there, and you start experiencing different things, it starts to ever evolve where you want to go in that as well, doesn't it really? So that, I guess it sounds like for you that the arts has always been something that's been that foundation and that key link to everything that you've kind of done from there.
Even when I was little, I drew. I remember because Mum and Dad had the care of deli, and they would constantly be out the front serving, and I'd sit there with the big white sheets of butcher's paper that they'd wrap all the deli stuff in, just drawing. Yeah. And I would sit there for hours, and then I'd copy characters I saw off Sesame Street and stuff like that. So there was plenty of opportunity to foster creativity.
Yeah, fantastic. So from sort of fast forwarding to, you know, a very interesting world that we're living in now, obviously, we're in the midst of, or you know, some would say winding down with this COVID at the moment. A lot of artists are finding that they've got quite a lot more time on their hands than they would normally do. Is there something that you, like, how are you finding it at the moment? Are you focusing anything on a specific creative project or projects? Is there something that you've kind of got that you're really wanting to work on? How have you sort of found this process for you in it?
I think some people have really found strength, and they have rallied, and I have not. I found the whole process really hard. Yeah. Because suddenly everything that you were doing, and BREC wasn't the only place I worked. I have like a little fashion school, and I was doing community art workshops, and things like Grooving the Move were coming up, and that all just stopped. And that's been really disconcerting. I'm amazed by the people that literally sprang into action though, and formed the Facebook groups, and you know, I got invited into some projects, which I was really fortunate that people thought of me, but I really applaud those people that got up and did something about it. I will admit, I've been kind of emotional, and this hasn't been a great productive time for me creatively at all.
I think it's definitely one thing you don't, there's no right or wrong way. This has been something that's hit people in such a very hard manner that there's no direction. This is all new to everybody. And I think, especially being in the arts community as we are very emotive people. We are very connected to who and what we do. So I think sometimes it might be a case of 6 months down the track, you'll look back to where you were and how you've managed to then get to that point 6 months, 1 year down the track, and go, this is how I was feeling, and I'm going to draw from that. Do you feel that's something that you could then sort of create and use that? Because I mean, the great things that we've always done in our world have been created from dramatic loss or massive love. It's been one dramatic effect from one way or another. Well, maybe that's just me, but I know that you're very similar to me in that. So
you can feel a building. Just jumping back to what we were saying before about it being a disconcerting time is we can't even as a society seem to agree on that. Some people want to continue lockdown, some people want lockdown over, some people never really believed in lockdown. I wish as a nation we could kind of get on the same page, but there are ways to go until I think that is going to happen. But what will get me through this, what will get us all through this, is the strength that we draw from each other in, I'm not just going to say the artistic community, because I'm not solely just part of the artist,
Yeah.
but like it is the community that will pull us all through this.
Yes.
But yeah, as far as creativity, I'll definitely draw strength from artists that I know here, artists that I know in the cities, artists that I know overseas. We're all going through the same thing. We all stay relatively connected.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's important. I hope
That
everyone's
was-
staying connected.
Absolutely. Well, that was actually going to be one of my questions. Is have you found that you've been drawing on those connections to sort of reach out, touch base, find out that how they're doing? Just in that, I think as being sort of the rural kids, we're used to having that kind of local background, and that on top of that arts background, as you were just saying. Do you find you've had people reaching out and connecting with you, and vice versa, that you're connecting with those people in the industry?
I think possibly because we do live in the country, isolation isn't always so foreign. And I was surprised at how quickly I went into isolation mode, like just went into total lockdown. I didn't have trouble with that. Other people did.
Yes. Yeah.
So maybe, that's where I was a little bit supportive. I started to waver when it just went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and there wasn't a lot of information forthcoming about when things were going to get back on track, quite simply because nobody knew.
No, that's right. So with dealing, because you had an amazing group of kids through the project last year, had you found that you were able to, were you sort of having a chat and keeping in touch with them as well during this period?
A little.
Because that would have been quite a lovely,
Look, there was initially breaking the news. And having to tell 16 kids and their families that, there was going to be a complete cessation. But BREC had assured me that, we would get it back on track, and we would at least be able to sort of finish that particular Young Voices program. The kids were really disappointed. And the families were disappointed. But, understanding, everybody was completely understanding, but there was this sadness. And I did some online art tutorials, so they were free for kids to do. So some of the Young Voices came in and did that. I know that some have just been really busy with their own homeschool programming.
Big learning curve.
I really look forward to seeing them again and hopefully finishing that project.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely, you can't, being able to have the face-to-face, even us just getting excited before we pressed record, was seeing another human, yes, this is amazing. And especially for kids, because they are so very tactile, and the group that you had was so very engaged with you and what you were doing. Seeing them coming into BREC, even when we were doing the gallery release, and the parents and the pride and excitement with it all was fantastic. With that, looking back on those fun times that we did have, and of course with certain forays with Phantom of the Opera that I know you thoroughly enjoyed.
Had a great time.
That was amazing, and it does feel like a long time ago, but now I'm thinking of it, it draws straight back.
No,
to
it does.
So much noise. It was beautiful.
It was 2018, and I mean, obviously, I don't think there is going to be any major production this year. Definitely. I don't know about next year.
Well,
missing that. The performer in me
yeah.
is missing that.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. Like, you get a bit artistically clogged up.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And
you need to release.
Yeah, you need that.
So, Nathan, we were talking about our very awesome experience we had with Phantom of the Opera, and you were performing in that as obviously as a performer, and all of us being involved at BREC, we were also very linked into that as a whole. And it's nice to have that look back onto sort of happy times that we've had at BREC. And
it was nice, wasn't it? It was really copacetic. I don't think I'd seen a community production that involved everybody from BREC in some facet.
Yeah.
It was really, really good.
And everyone seemed to be really invested in it. I think that was a really exciting and engaging thing to be involved with. Mind you, I think we all slept very, very well once it was all done, however, and celebrated marvellously, don't get me wrong. But as a performer for you, now that we've sort of had that look back, looking forward for you as a performer, as a teacher, as a role model for your students, what would you like to actually see come to BREC? What's something that you would love to see it evolve into?
Do you know, the thing is, Sam, since I came to work for BREC about 10 months ago, I'm literally amazed by how much goes on at BREC all day and all night. And I really don't feel that there's anything that's not represented. You know, we have national touring shows, we have state touring shows. Now with guidance through Fiona, we have got locally produced shows that aren't just performing for peanuts. I just want that building back open.
Yeah.
And I want everything that was happening there to be happening again, because it was such an amazing place. And I honestly don't think there was a deficit. There's literally something there for everybody. Maybe some more touring children's shows.
Yes, yeah.
Just because you sometimes notice the gaps in the program. But obviously, you know, they can only tour during school holidays and weekends and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe just a few more kids touring shows, because we've just got such a huge population of children that want to be engaged.
Yeah, very true.
The waiting list for Young Voices is huge.
Fantastic.
And it's grown the more people have talked about the program.
Yeah.
So let's get those doors back open.
Yes, that sounds fantastic. I love that idea. I think it's one of those things. I've spoken to a few friends and colleagues since we've closed is what do you think BREC actually provides for the community? And the answers have been very varied, but I'd love to get your point on that. What do you think BREC is as a solid idea or item to the community?
It's just a place of engagement,
Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah.
Whether you go there to work, to volunteer, to be part of the staff, it provides an amazing crossover from people from all walks of life, all different ages. I mean, how much wisdom do we get from your volunteers? They've worked their whole professional working lives, and then they're coming into volunteer, and they've got so much to share. And if it wasn't for the fact that we all work so hard and quickly, you know, you can sit down and just talk to them.
Yes.
For so long.
Yeah.
We've got some staff that have been at BREC since the doors opened. I mean, I remember those doors opening. I was just a little kid. It was huge, but I'm so glad it's there. And I think that's the thing I may have just said. It's, you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
That's
and now
right.
there's just
It's a different
a
kind
big
of love affair.
blank void.
Yes.
Not just for, and it's not just for the people that work there, because obviously, you know, we want to go back to work, but it's just for the people that came to access it, or whether they were people that came for the symposiums during the day, or, you know, anything that our outside vendors were running. I mean, how much variation do you see in those function rooms?
So you mentioned previously that you remember the doors opening to BREC. Now, as a relative newcomer to Bunbury, I find that awesome. I've always wanted to have a long connection to something, and even though I've only worked at BREC a short time, I love the building. I love the experiences I've had there. You must have seen so much over the time and been involved in so many different facets of the organisation and building through a very pivotal time throughout your life, because you're still a very, you know, young gentleman as it is. I had to throw that in there. But with that sort of time span, with us having our 30th year anniversary this year, do you find that with your experience with BREC, working and being involved there as a young person yourself, and now working with people who are younger, you know, kids and teenagers, what do you think some of the benefits are of performing arts for them? Because it's something that's not really usually promoted, you know, at schools and such. You were saying about that deficit that sometimes places have, that there isn't enough provided for them, and you're filling that gap in some ways with what you're doing. How would you describe that, the performing arts and that connection to the children?
I remember being in my own sort of primary school environment, and you know, you would run behind on curriculum. So your teacher would announce, like, we're behind on spelling, or, you know, we need work on phonics, so no art this week. Art was the thing that continually gets pushed aside. Performing arts same thing. I don't know whether our teachers just weren't made confident with the performing arts. So I can look back on my own experience, and the thing is that it sounds simple. Positive engagement is positive. We were continually engaged. We were always rehearsing something. It kept us on the straight and narrow. You know, the more you're taken up with something, the less time that you kind of have for deviations.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that I kept myself really busy during some of my formative years when maybe some of my friends that weren't involved in the arts or thought the arts were a load of rubbish are struggling.
Yeah.
It's just a really positive outlet. I kind of wish Australian society saw how important it was. I mean, everyone has a favourite book, everyone has a favourite song, everyone has a favourite TV show. It's all the arts.
Yeah.
It's all one and the same thing. And I've mentioned that BREC isn't the only place that I work, and I'm working with small groups of kids now that have not had any involvement in the arts, and it's not because they don't want to. It's because they're just not aware, or they haven't been given the opportunity. And BREC is there providing those opportunities. We did Young Voices for free. It didn't cost our participants to come. We made sure that we got kids from all over the regions, from all sorts of backgrounds, so nobody was left out. That's really important.
And hence why you've got a waiting list.
Hence why we've got a waiting list. No pressure to run a second.
No, not at all. Hint, hint. But with that, obviously, you would have had, just from an onlooker last year, looking at those kids walking through the Sky Bar and the parents beaming, they're so proud of the kids. And
it's not just that, it's outside of stuff. So we're all connected on Messenger because that's where I put all the details for what we're doing and throw them photos and stuff so they know what their kids are doing for sort of 4 hours at a time. But my biggest surprises are when I'm out in the community doing other stuff and I'll maybe see one of my young voices. Hi. And you get messages from the parents who sort of see you. I just want to read you one.
Yeah,
I saw one of my young voices who was so shy when she started, so shy. And since doing Young Voices, she had gotten engaged in a community event, and I just messaged her mum to say how nice it was to see her there. And I got the message back, she loves seeing you, she's so confident now, your program has helped her in so many ways, I can't thank you enough. Which is really kind. I mean, that's amazing for that particular young person. I also want to say, because I'm a coordinator, I get a lot of that positive feedback, and a lot of people sort of relegate it down to me. It's not just me, it's the entire program. The thing that makes Young Voices work is that all the staff are engaged in it, all the volunteers are engaged in it. You know, we had these little, some of them were like 7, these little tiny people walk into BREC, 8 months ago, 9. And now some of you guys know them by name. Like, these little people making a contribution has been invaluable. And they learn from us. We kind of learn from them too.
Exactly, I was going to mention that, yeah, definitely. And watching that confidence, I think, is a very big thing for young people these days. There's so much contact with social media and outside influences that I think, if I was going through school now, I would really struggle. And I was fortunate enough to be put into...
What would it be like? What would high school be like?
What would high school be like?
Media?
And that would be terrifying. Knowing what I was like, and I was a bit of a troublemaker as a kid, and my mum put me into theatre arts, performing arts. And having that platform to learn, hate it to start with, try and figure out, because they're trying to figure out how to be an adult as well in a very scary world. And I think having that release, we were talking about even as a performer earlier, you have this bubble up in you that you feel like if you don't do something soon, it's just going to spew out everywhere. And I think as humans, we do need to release that somehow, as whether it's in a creative format. It doesn't have to be theatre or anything else.
That's what we're talking. It can be a positive release, it can be a negative release. You
Absolutely.
can put your energy into things that are good for you. You can put your energy into things that are just going to lead you astray.
That's right. And obviously with that, for you, it's providing a platform for a variety of people that are available to it to actually have that experience and connect to something else. That, you know, let's face it, doing performing arts or any type of arts project, it knackers you out. It's usually something you spend money on, so you've got no money to do anything or go out and do anything else to get yourself into trouble. So it's a pretty good addiction, I think, in some ways as well, isn't it, really?
No, it was.
Which is great. So it must have been a really, you know, as much as you're saying, yes, it's that team effort, it takes someone like you to drive that as well. So, you know, that must be, as an artist yourself, and obviously as your coordinator and mentor, a very powerful thing to have gone through for you to receive that feedback as well. So well done to you.
I miss that job. And I miss those
We
kids.
miss having you there too.
We'll get it all back.
Absolutely. And as I said, we'll be looking back at this in 6 months or even a year's time and plotting other things to do and opening those doors anytime soon to, you know, bring back that kind of connection and engagement for the community of all ages, which will be very important. I'd like to say thank you very much for your time today, Nathan. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear about you and where you're at. Thank you for your honesty. It's been greatly appreciated.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, everyone.